So today's topic is about break-even. My students, they keep asking me, Miss, what do you mean by break-even? Sometimes they are familiar with the formula to calculate break-even, but they don't know what exactly break-even is all about. So what I did was I took my personal experience into as an example, and that's how I taught them. So I'll do the same in this case as well. So what I did was now, so as you all already know, I conduct classes. So one of my concerns when I initially started classes, I had a concern. I was a little worried whether I will be able to pay off my bills. So in my class, I had two types of expenses that I had to pay. There were two types of costs that I had to pay. So one type of cost is known as the fixed cost and the other one is known as the variable cost. So in my case, I had to pay both fixed cost and variable cost. Every month I had to pay them. So for example, fixed cost is a cost that will not change with the level of output. Now, whether I get one student or whether I get 5 students, whether I get 20 students, I had to pay my fixed cost. Okay, so my fixed cost in my case, I had to pay rent. So this place that I am doing classes right now, I have to kind of pay a rent because obviously that's something that I have promised. So I have to pay. So now this particular classroom, this place, they can accommodate around 30 students. So there are some days where I have one student, there are some days that I have 5 students, there are some days that I have 30 students, there are some days that I only have online classes, and there are some days that I don't have classes at all. Okay, so even if I have classes or not, if I have promised to pay this particular fixed cost, I have to pay. Now in my case, I have to pay 15,000 rupees for this particular place each and every single month, whether I have classes or not. That is exactly what fixed cost is. So whether I have classes or not, I have to pay this particular amount, which is 15,000 rupees. Then on the other hand, I also have to pay my variable cost. Now variable cost is a little different. Variable cost is a cost that will change with the level of output. Now in my case, if I get more students, my variable cost is going to be high, and if I have few students, my variable cost is going to be low. Now in this case, just think about this. Now in my case, I print notes for each and every student. So to print one tube for each student, it costs me around 500 rupees. So if I get one student, I only have to print one tube. That means my variable cost is 500 rupees. If I get two students, I have to print two tubes, which is 1000 rupees. 1000 rupees is my variable cost. So you can see, if I don't have students, I don't have to print tubes, so my variable cost is going to be 0. So if I get 10 students, I will have to print 10 tubes, which means it's going to cost me 5,000 rupees. So that is my variable cost. A cost that will change with the level of output. A cost that will change with, now in my case I'm doing classes, so it's a cost that changes with the level of students that I get. So my concern, I was a little concerned whether, so it's pretty natural for a person to get worried, especially when they initially start a business. They need to know whether they'll be able to pay off their expenses. That is something that they have to think. So in that case, I was also worried. So what I did was I kind of did my calculation and I found out that each and every month I have to pay 20,000 rupees. Now, 20,000 rupees is my total cost. When I say total cost, it includes both fixed cost, I have to pay the rent, plus the printing tubes. When I take this in total, every month I have to pay 20,000 rupees, my fixed cost and my variable cost in total. So 20,000 is my total cost. Okay. So I wanted to know how many classes do I have to conduct in order to cover up this particular cost. In order to pay off my bills, how many classes do I have to conduct? Minimum how many classes do I have to conduct? That's something that I had to think of. So in my case, now I'll give you an example. In my case, I usually charge 2,000. Um, okay, sorry. So I usually charge 2,000 rupees for each and every class. So that is the selling price of my class. Okay, so I charge 2,000 rupees for each class. Now I wanted to know how many classes do I have to do in order to cover up my cost. So in this case, I found out that 2,000 rupees is the selling price, or that's the sort of charge that I charge from each and every student. So if I charge 2,000 rupees, I have to at least do 10 classes in order to pay off my bills. Okay. So now in this case, of course, you don't have to do a lot of calculation. It's mostly like common sense. You understand. Okay. If my bills, if I have to pay 20,000 rupees as my cost, and if I sell each product or each class, if I charge 2000 rupees, that means I have to at least conduct 10 classes each and every month in order to pay off my bills. Now in this case, I am not aiming for profit. I don't want to. Now in this case, I'm not aiming for profit. Initially when I started my classes, I was not aiming for profit. I just wanted to know how many classes do I have to do in order to cover up my cost? How many minimum? Okay, minimum. How many classes do I have to conduct in order to pay off my bills? Because if I can't pay off my bills like the rent and other costs, probably I won't be able to keep my business going. So because of that, my expectation was just to go at the break even. I just wanted to make enough of money to pay off my bills. That was my concern. So in this case, I only had to do that. So this is the break-even output. That means I have to do at least 10 classes each and every month to pay off my bills, which is 20,000. So now, in this case, of course, you don't have to do a lot of calculations. You can clearly understand. But usually, in your exam, they will ask you to do the break-even calculation. So this is how we do the break-even calculation. You take the fixed cost divided by selling price minus variable cost per unit. That means cost of producing just one unit. So you take the variable cost per unit, variable cost of producing just one unit. Now in my case, I told you it's 500, my selling price is 2000. I have done the calculation over here. You can clearly see. So it's 15,000 is my fixed cost, which is the rent. Then my selling price of each class is usually 2000 rupees, and I have to pay my variable cost. So cost of printing each tube was 500 rupees. So when you do the calculation, I got the answer as 10. 10 is the break-even output. The reason why we do this calculation is when we do that, we get an idea about, okay, minimum, this is how many products that you have to sell in order to pay off the bills. Now, a business should have a clear idea about this because none of us want to go through losses. We at least want to make enough of money to pay off our bills. This is why you calculate the break-even level of output. Okay, so sometimes, mostly for Cambridge students, they usually ask you to calculate contribution. Sometimes this denominator or like the down part of this formula, they usually kind of call this as the contribution. This bottom part of this particular formula, they call it as contribution. Contribution means just this part, okay? Selling price minus variable cost per unit, we call it as the contribution. So what do they mean by contribution? Now in that case, okay, so I have done the working. So 2000 is my selling price, 500 is my variable cost per unit. That means to print each tube, I have to spend 500 rupees. So when you deduct it, okay, you get 1500 rupees as the denominator. What does that mean? That means 1500 rupees per class. What does that mean? I have written in green color, in green. So you can see 1500 rupees per class is left after covering up your variable cost. Okay, from each product, after you have deducted your variable cost, you have 1500 rupees left. That 1500 rupees will go from each class. 1500 rupees will go as it will contribute to my fixed cost, and also it will contribute as my profit. It will help me to make a little bit of profit at the same time pay off my fixed cost. That is why we do the contribution. It's important that you do the contribution calculation as well. Only if they ask. So contribution is nothing else. If they ask you what is contribution, you just kind of do this calculation and show selling price minus the variable cost per unit. That means from each product. Now in my case, after deducting my variable cost, which is 500 rupees, okay, that means I have 1500 rupees left from each class, which will contribute or which will help me to pay off my fixed cost and to make a little bit of profit. So this is exactly what break even is all about. So sometimes, now when I initially started classes, my aim was not to make a profit. My aim was to just make enough of money to pay off my bills. So in that case, you have to do a little bit of break even calculation and see. So in this case, I didn't make any profit. I also didn't go through a loss. I just made enough of money to pay off my bills and to keep my business going. So this is very important. This is why we do the break-even calculation. So it's very important that you kind of understand this formula it's better if you can memorize this formula. But if you don't understand what break even is all about, what do they mean by break even output? This is what it means: the minimum amount of products that you have to produce and sell in order to pay off your bills, in order to pay off your cost, which is your fixed cost and your variable cost. This is what break even is all about. Hope you understood that part. We can get into the next area as well. Okay, so I took one step ahead and I just wanted to show what will happen if you don't produce at the break-even level of output. What will happen? Now, for example, I got 10 as the break-even level of output, which means I at least have to conduct 10 classes in order to cover up my 20,000 rupee cost, right? So that is fine. At least I'm not making a loss. I'm also not making a profit. I'm just making enough of money to pay off my bills. So that is at the break-even level of output. Then after that, if I have or if I conduct only 9 classes below the break-even level of output, just imagine if I only conduct 9 classes, I will definitely make an income or like a revenue of 18,000, because for each class I charge 2,000, and if I conduct 9 classes I will only make 18,000, but I have bills which will cost me around 20,000. So from there itself you can see that my cost exceeds the revenue money. More than my income, my cost exceeds. So in this case, what will happen is that I will actually go through a loss because I am in short of 2,000 rupees to pay off my bills. So that is why it's important to always produce goods or services at the break-even level of output or above. Now just imagine if I have not 9 classes, if I have 11 classes. For example, instead of 10 or instead of 9, now 10 is my break-even level of output, but instead of 10, I have 1 extra class, so now I have 11 classes. Now if I conduct 11 classes, I will make a revenue of 22,000, because for each class I charge 2,000 rupees. So I will make an income or revenue each month of 22,000, and I have bills that I have to pay, which will cost me around 20,000. So from that itself, you can clearly see in this case, my revenue exceeds the cost. That means my income is greater than my expenses. So I will make a profit of 2,000 rupees in this case. Why? Because I am making more income than my cost. I have 2,000 rupees extra. Even after paying all my bills, I will have 2,000 rupees extra, which will be my profit. So this is exactly why we need to know the break-even level of output. If you produce anything below the break-even level of output, you won't be able to cover up your bills. But if you produce more than your break-even level of output, now here it was 10, but I conducted 11 classes, then I will have excess amount of money with me and I will make a profit. This is why break-even is important. Okay, so the next area that we will have to learn is about the margin of safety. Now, what do they mean by margin of safety? It's very important that you have an idea about how to do the margin of safety calculation. So if they ever ask you to calculate margin of safety, this is how you calculate. So I have written in green, it's the current level of output minus the break-even level of output. That's how we take the margin of safety. Now, like how I mentioned, now once we calculated the break-even, we found out that I at least have to do 10 classes in order to cover up my cost. So 10 classes was the break-even output for me. Then let's assume now that was the minimum amount of classes that I have to conduct in order to cover up my expenses. So that is the break-even level of output, which is 10. Let's assume currently I'm conducting around 15 classes. 15 classes. So now how do we take the margin of safety? Current level of output is 15 classes or 15 output. Now in my case, my output is the classes now. So I will take 15 minus 10. 10 is the break-even level of output. So now in my case, I at least have to do 10 classes. But currently I am conducting 15 classes. So when you take the difference, it shows as if 5 classes is my margin of safety. What does this mean? It means that now there are certain months my students will leave. There are certain months, especially after their exams, they will usually leave the class. So in that case, I have to make sure that I can cut down on 5 classes. But if I go beyond 5 classes, I will start making losses. So I will always try my best. So I don't have to worry if 5 students are going to leave, or if I miss 5 classes per month, that's not going to be a problem for me, because anyway that money, whatever the money that I'm earning is enough have to pay off my bills. So I can afford to lose only 5 classes. If I go beyond 5 classes, then I will start making losses. I won't be able to pay off my bills. Currently I have 15 classes. I can't go below 10 classes. I at least have to have 10 classes. So with the current level of output, I can only lose out 5 classes each month. If I go beyond 5 classes, then I will end up making losses. So this is how we calculate the break-even level of output. This is how we calculate the, so like how I mentioned, this is how we calculate the margin of safety. This is how we calculate the margin of safety. You take the difference between the break-even level of the output and the current level of output. Currently I am conducting 15 classes. But I'm at least supposed to conduct 10 classes. So what it really means is that if I have to give up on certain classes, I can only afford to give up on 5 classes, not anything more than 5 classes. 5 classes, yes, I can still afford to pay off my bills without going to a loss. This is what you mean by margin of safety. Okay, so the next area is, now if we increase the selling price or if we decrease the selling price, how will that impact the break-even level of output? That is exactly what we are going to learn. Now, initially I told you I have to at least do 10 classes in order to pay off my total cost. Okay, in order to pay off my bills, I at least have to do 10 classes. So sometimes doing 10 classes it can be a little bit overwhelming, it can be a little difficult. So maybe I can raise the price of my class. By doing that, what will happen is that I only have to do few classes to pay off my bills. Now, for example, that is what will happen. Okay, so let's assume, now initially I was just charging 2000 rupees for each class and I had to do 10 classes in order to pay off my bills. Now, in this example, what I did was, I kind of felt maybe I was feeling a little tired, overwhelmed. So I wanted to reduce the number of classes that I do each and every month. So maybe I felt like, okay, I also want to pay off my bills, but at the same time, I also want to reduce the workload. So what am I going to do? So maybe I kind of thought about raising the price of my class. So for each class, instead of charging 2000, I'm charging 4000 rupees now for each and every class. So now when I actually do the calculation, I found out that I only have to do 5 classes each month in order to pay off my bills. So that means if by any chance, if you increase the selling price, you will have to do few classes. There will be a fall in the break-even level of output. Okay, the break-even level of output will fall because you have increased the selling price. You just have to do 5 classes now in order to pay off your bills, which is 20,000. Did you understand? Hope you all understood this. Okay, then we'll see how, or like what will happen if I reduce the price. Now I kind of think that no, I shouldn't overcharge my students. So I decide to reduce the prices of my classes. Now initially I was just charging 2000 rupees, but now I reduce the charge to 1000 rupees per class. So now each class, so I charge around 1000 rupees for each and every class. So now if I reduce the price of my classes, what will happen? Now I will at least have to teach 20 students to cover up my cost, which is 20,000 rupees. So you can clearly see, when you reduce the selling price, you will have to increase the break-even output. You will have to do more classes to cover up your costs. And if you increase the selling price, you will have to sell fewer products to cover up your cost. This is something that you need to know. Okay, so the next area is we have to also understand what will happen to the break-even level of output if our cost changes. Okay, so for example, now initially I charged 2000 rupees for each class and I had to do 10 classes in order to cover up my cost, which was 20,000 rupees. Now, just imagine if my cost decreases, it can be the variable cost or fixed cost. So, if my cost decreases to 10,000 rupees, I have to only do 5 classes to cover up my 10,000 cost. So, can you clearly see that obviously when your cost decreases, you only have to do fewer classes to pay off the cost, which is 10,000. So, you can clearly see fewer classes, and I have written I only have to do 5 classes each and every month in order to cover up my cost. So lower break-even level of output. That means I only have to produce, or in my case, I don't have to produce goods and services. I only have to conduct 5 classes every month to pay off my bills, which is 10,000 rupees. Then the second example, let's assume my cost increases to 40,000. It can be maybe because they decided to increase the rent, or maybe the printing cost increased. So because of that, now my total cost is 40,000 rupees. Now what will happen? I will have to at least do 20 classes each and every month in order to cover up my 40,000 rupee cost. So that means I will have to do more classes, and which also means it means higher break-even level of output. I have to conduct more classes in order to cover up my cost. So this is very important, this particular area, because you need to know what will happen to the break-even level of output if cost increases or decreases, and if selling price increases or selling price decreases. Because especially if you're sitting for your O-level Edexcel exams, you need to be able to kind of understand, because this is a question that they usually ask in MCQs. So it's very important that you need to have a clear understanding that if your cost increases, you have to do more work. You have to conduct more classes, you have to sell more products in order to cover up your costs. So the same thing will go if you reduce the prices of your classes at the same time. Now in my case, if I reduce the prices of my classes, I will have to do more classes in order to cover up my cost. So this is actually more like common sense. It's not, you don't have to sit and memorize this or study this. You need to be able to understand. It's more like common sense. Yes, if your cost is increasing, you will have to produce and sell more products in order to cover up your cost. So this is something that you all need to learn.